Welcome to today's session of the 360 Man Mentorship Program. Today is actually the final session for the model on the young man and his social interactions. This is our 2024 edition of the mentorship program. So, as a way of introduction, we'll be looking at two major themes under this discussion for today. And these two themes will cover these areas. The first one is the role that hormones play on our emotions or on the expression of our emotions. Then also the impact of these emotions we are going to talk about on our social interactions. And as our focus has always been in the mentorship program, we'll be looking at it in the aspect of our work relations and then also in love relationships. I have a book on chemicals at play in love relationships available on Seller, and I think that if you need a copy, you can find the link right in the description section. All right, so we'll zoom into today's discussion on chemicals at play in our social interactions, especially in 2024. So we need to understand that we are the mercy of our emotions as humans or as individuals. Um, as natural men, natural women, natural young men, natural ladies, we are all under the mercy or under the influence of emotions. And these emotions are largely as a result of hormones at play in our body. And if we go into the science aspect of hormones, you come to understand that hormones are more of chemicals in the body, and more or less of it can cause a whole lot of things. So at the end of today's session, I believe that you understand what the various hormones have to do or come into play when it comes to the expression of our emotions. So when we're able to understand and master these things, it will help us in our daily interactions with people in all areas of our lives. So we'll be looking at emotions for now. Emotions, they are just complex psychological states, and then it can be very subjective. It's a subjective experience because at one point, what someone is feeling or is experiencing or is expressing in a particular space may not be the same thing that the other person in that same space may be experiencing. So, for example, we can be in the same office. One person will be happy, the other person will be sad at the same instance, undertaking the same activities. You can be in a place, everybody is happy, all of a sudden, someone is so sad. So that tells you that emotions are very subjective. It's a subjective experience. It's also a physiological response, and that is what we'll be focusing on today. It's a physiological response because it's as a result of the physiology of our body, certain chemicals, certain hormones that are knocking or coming together to play out that results in the emotions that are being displayed. That is not to say that all emotions are as a result of hormones 100%. Certain events can cause a rise in certain chemicals in our body or a rise in the hormonal levels in our body, and then will result in these emotions that we would see. For example, you walk around and then somebody dashes you 100 bucks or 100 Ghana cedis. All of a sudden, because of that amount of money that you have received, you may be sad or you may be on a normal regular day. but there are certain rushes in your body, certain hormonal changes in your body, and all of a sudden you are happy or you're excited, or sometimes you are put in a state of surprise. You are surprised at that amount of money that you have received. So emotions are subjective, and it's also as a result of physiological responses, and also as a result of behavioral or expressive response. And a typical example is when you have seen something that can cause you to panic. For example, you are walking along a garden, a walkway in a garden, and all of a sudden you see a snake. You can be frightened at that moment. And at that moment, a lot of rushes, adrenaline rushes, and other things go on in your body. And they push you in a state of fear. So at that point in time, it's a behavioral or an expressive response to what you have seen. And these rushes in hormones or in chemicals in your body will result in that emotion of fear. And we'll talk about how this play out in both genders and how we respond to it, and how would we try to manage fear based on the chemicals in our body or based on the hormones. In today's discussion, whenever you hear chemicals, just know that I'm talking about hormones. So in our social interactions, these emotions play out, or it play a very crucial role. It shapes how we communicate with people. It shapes how we perceive things. It shapes how we relate to other people. It shapes even sometimes the energy we put into work, especially on the part of females. And we'll learn this in the later part of our discussion today. How this hormonal thing affects the calendar of women, and how it affects their energy levels, and so on and so forth. So emotions play out in our daily interactions in this and many more ways. So we can see it plays out, it turns out to be, one of them could be happiness, it could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be fear, it could be love. Some people may express signs of disgust, that's extreme um, disappointment to things. And then also there is also that feeling of excitement or surprise, that is an amplified version of the happiness. And for Christians, there is also the emotion of joy, irrespective of the circumstance you find yourself. There is that outburst of joy. So that is also another aspect. And then there is also the emotion of love. All these are emotions, and they play out differently in our bodies. So when we talk about happiness, happiness would help to enhance social bonds. It will help you, it promotes a certain social behavior, it leads to greater connection, a greater social support, a greater cooperation. If you are working in a team or you are working with colleagues and everyone is happy, there is greater cooperation. An influencing factor of happiness in the workspace could be um, money. I watched one funny video how that people were waiting for salary alerts at a certain point in the month, and then that affects how they worked. At every moment in time, they are just checking their phone for a notification for a salary alert. And once that notification hits the screen, there is total excitement, there is total happiness. So that is one of that. There is also anger when you're working in a team and someone is not pulling up any weight, and it's like everything is left for a few people to do, and this same person who is not putting in any bit now tends to sometimes criticize the little effort or the great effort or great achievement that the rest of the team members have brought on board. It can bring out that emotion of anger. The loss of a beloved one, the loss of something dear to you. It could be money, it could be valuable property can also lead to sadness. And so emotions play out in so many ways. Fear, I've talked about the fact that you're walking through a garden and you see a snake. There could be that emotion of fear. Then love to you walk past someone you are interested in, you walk past someone you care for, and there's certain rushes in your body, um, just because you have seen the sight of someone, or sometimes you've even seen uh, a phone call notification coming from someone you expect to hear from. All those feelings. Sometimes you are stressed, and just a call from home, a call from your parents, a call from your siblings, a call from a cousin could just bring out that emotion of love, and it can boost a lot of other things in your body and help your interactions with people who may not even be the object of the love. So now let's look at hormones or the chemicals, and then how they tend to affect the emotions that we display. Hormones in itself, they are produced in our body from certain glands of the body. And I will not go into the deep science of it, because all these hormones have specific areas in the bodies that they are being produced. For example, we have the testosterone produced from the testes, and the ovaries in some cases of females. We have the estrogen being produced from the ovaries of females. We have insulin. Insulin is a hormone produced from the pancreas, and they have all functions that they play in our body. In terms of emotions, we'll be looking at the hormones involved in happiness, sadness, fear, anger, love, the emotions that we have talked about. But the other functions of hormones in the body, such as metabolism and the ability to break down certain complex food that we take into our body, sometimes hormones have a role to play in this. The ability for fetus in the womb of females to develop, a lot of hormonal activity goes on in things in this ability to grow from one stage in life to the other as a result of hormones. And sexual functions, mood and cognition, all of these hormones have a role to play. And homeostatics, that's a typical example, is the regulation of glucose level in our body as a result of our pancreas ability to release insulin. In cases where people have this um, deficiency, you would realize that it could lead to certain types of diabetes and all of that. So hormones are very critical, and they play a very good vital role in our body. So what are some of the hormones we'll be discussing today? We'll be looking at oxytocin, dopamine, cortisol, estrogen, and then testosterone. There is also the serotonin, and then also there are some others that we'll be mentioning in the course of our discussion today. The goal is so that it will help you understand that sometimes people are not as we see them. Certain things are working behind the scenes so that we understand. It helps us to be able to tolerate people the more, especially when you work in a workspace where you have to work with females, or you work in a place where females are dominate. I find myself in an environment where I work with 90% female, a very dominated female population. And so this understanding helps in relating to such people. And as Christians, which majority of you following this mentorship program are, it even helps us to better understand people, and then also offer help and support to them when they need be. So when we talk about oxytocin, some people term it, or generally it's being termed as the love hormone. The love hormone. A lot of it is being released in terms of a mother breastfeeding a child. A lot of oxytocin is being released, and that is what leads to that bonding between the mother and the child. So that love hormone brings about bonding, and every other thing, such as every other love interaction, shoots up the level of oxytocin in the body. So, for example, activities such as hugging, kissing, and all sort of uh, activities that pertains to love or mutual relations with people leads to a lot of release of this oxytocin, and it brings about a level of trust. It brings about a level of bonding and deepened social connections, and it also helps to reduce stress and anxiety, because the higher the level of oxytocin, the lower the level of cortisol. So it will also reduce stress and then and anxiety. Then we also have dopamine. Dopamine is also released highly when there are pleasurable activities. Um, it could be pleasurable activities such as sightseeing or anything that you find pleasure in. To some people, a lot of dopamine is being released when they eat their favorite food. So having access to their favorite food can shoot up dopamine levels in their body. Some people feel so excited when they are able to read a certain book cover to cover, when they read novels, when they hear certain stories, when they hear love stories, when they watch love series, telenovelas, and stuff like that. So all of that could release dopamine. So things that are pleasurable to you can increase the levels of hormones, the dopamine hormones in your body. And the effect is that it brings about increased feelings of pleasure, increased feeling of pleasure, motivation, and some level of euphoria. And it can also lead to certain addictive behaviors. For example, that is what is clearly seen in people who get addicted to the screens because they fall in love with a certain love story in a telenovela. People fall in love with a certain food, and so they can't stop going to that restaurant. They can't stop ordering that particular food from the eatery. Some of these things are as a result of uh, excessive amounts of dopamine that have been released into your system by that mental picture you've had, or mental recognition that you have had because of that interaction you've had with that thing that brought you pleasure. Then we can also look at cortisol levels. Cortisol is also a hormone, could be in both men and women, or male and female. And this is normally responsible for stress. Stress, high levels, high levels in your body means that you are so stressed, and can come about when you are anxious, can come about when you have deprived yourself of sleep for so long, or you've even deprived yourself for sleep for a day. Your cortisol levels shoot up, and these can bring about so many effects, and the effects are also in the line of stress. So can lead to even more stress, can lead to further anxiety. It can lead to impaired cognitive ability or cognitive function. So people get so stressed to the point that they begin to see men like trees. They don't see men well. They don't see very well. They have blurred vision. They have um, they are not able to focus. It impairs their thinking capacity, or impairs their ability to focus on an activity. Then also it can be detrimental to your health because it suppresses your immune system at a point when the levels are too high. And that's why a lot of people now are advocating at a healthy work-life balance so that you desist from any form of um, drivers that will bring about stress. The next hormone we'll talk about is estrogen. Estrogen also is released predominantly in females. Um, they are responsible for reproductive health. So estrogen and progesterone normally regulates the menstrual cycle of females. And there's a portion of this session today where we'll talk more about that. So estrogen is released from the ovaries and sometimes the adrenal glands and the fat tissues in females. And so you find females who are bulky or fat having sometimes having issues with hormonal balance because there are a lot of estrogen in their body than progesterone. And so it could also even impact or have an impact on their uh, cycle. So that's about that. And so right from here, you can tell that one way you can manage estrogen is to engage in physical activities, exercise, so that you can burn off some of the fats. So things like that. Then it has other effects on the body. It's released highly during puberty, during ovulation, and also during pregnancy, as well as the oxytocin. Oxytocin is also released more during pregnancy and then also during breastfeeding, so that there is that bond that is created between the fetus or the baby and then the mother. So that's about that. Then the effects, it can also improve the mood of people. They can have a very good mood, increase libido for sexual activities because of the reproductive nature of estrogen. Then enhance cognitive function. Excessive levels of it can also lead to mood swings and reproductive issues when you have so much of it. A balance of it helps. A balance of estrogen and progesterone. Then the next one we'll be talking more on is testosterone. That is found predominantly in males, released from their testes. And just like the estrogen, it's also very high during puberty, during physical activity, and then competitive situations when people have to compete in certain competitions. Um, they have that release. And normally, when they win in competitions or when they are heroes, they are being mentioned, they are honored. There are shots of this testosterone into the bloodstream. All of these hormones are being released into the blood and then they rush all throughout the body because the blood is being circulated throughout the body. Yeah. So all of these have an impact on the way we relate with people or our social interactions. Regular physical exercises, healthy diets such as diets rich in vitamin D and zinc, an adequate amount of sleep can all help maintain the testosterone levels. Then with estrogen, healthy diets such as soy products, flax seeds, regular exercise can also help regulate the estrogen levels. Then with dopamine to regular exercise and foods that are rich in tyrosine such as avocados, bananas, and almonds can also help regulate the dopamine. Then with cortisol, it's all about stress. Anything that you can do to distress. So for some people, it can be leisure activities like swimming, like mindfulness, like meditation, listening to music. and anything that you can do to reduce stress can help lower the cortisol levels. Then I must also say that balanced diet and a good amount of sleep can also help reduce cortisol level, especially the sleep. When there's a lot of sleep deprivation, you have a higher amount of cortisol in your body, leading to stress and all the other things follow. I have a book also on mindfulness. I think that one is on Amazon. And so maybe if you would want to look at that too, you can check my Amazon for that book. All right. Now let's look at the various emotions that we have mentioned. That's not exhaustive. There are a lot of emotions that can be talked about, like the feeling of disgust, the feeling of surprise, people being in shock, taken aback, extreme fear, and stuff like that. But we'll be looking at the basic ones, which I think the others all sort of fall under, or they are just a higher form of expression of these basic ones. So happiness, certain hormones are actually responsible for happiness. That is not to say that it's only these hormones regulating happiness. I mean, the events that we see or the things that happen to us brings about happiness, but the mechanism as to how the happiness comes about is what we are talking about. Once you see something that is bringing you happiness, there is a sudden increase in levels of these hormones that we are talking about now. So dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins are hormones that are normally in relation to happiness or regulate happiness. Dopamine is known as the feel good hormone, or in some cases, the pleasure hormone. So anything that has to do with the pleasurable activity, as we have talked about, can release it. Then serotonin. Serotonin is more like a regulator. So it's a neurotransmitter. It helps to regulate mood and is also associated with feelings of well-being and happiness. So we'll be seeing more of serotonin because it's more like just it's a neurotransmitter that regulates a lot of the moods. Then endorphins, they are the natural painkillers in our body. They are produced when we have exercise, like we are in a physical activity, when we laugh. So laughter, or funny activities that brings laughter can help reduce pain, and other pleasurable activities all contributes to a sense of euphoria, and all these coming together brings about happiness. And so I believe that the next time when you are feeling certain pains, aside the physical painkillers, can be looking at certain things that can bring laughter, certain pleasurable activities. They can help suppress pain. And I know that in certain jurisdictions, um, when certain surgeries are being undertaken, or when certain procedures are being undertaken, it's being undertaken in an environment of music, in an environment of jazz music, just to suit the patients. In certain jurisdiction, even in childbirth, there are certain music being played just to create that ambience. It's just to bring about a pleasurable activity, increase the happiness mood, so that it will then reduce the sense of fear, the sense of stress, and and it makes everything move on smoothly. So the next time you are having so much activities in your workspace, you have so many deadlines to meet, and it's like everybody is irritable. You can think of something pleasurable that is of a low activity that you can do in combination with the high activity work you're doing, so that there is a balanced level of happiness and stress. So you don't end up having a lot of stress at the end of the day. An example, you are working on something that requires your full attention on the PC, entering data and stuff like that. You can also have a low mind engaging activity like listening to jazz, listening to music, normally music without words, so that you are not lost in the lyric. It depends on the person. When I need to focus on activities, I find it difficult to listen to music like music with lyrics because I am also into music. So maybe I may want to pick out certain things from the music, but I'll do well with jazz. I'll do well with um, just instrumentals. Even in that case, it depends sometimes. So just know what works best for you in your workspace. If it's possible, can have some good soulful music in the background, jazz music. And on my YouTube channel, I know I have some soulful piano tunes, about 6 hours long piano tunes. You can just be playing some of these things whilst you are working, and especially if it works best for you, so that you have a very balanced level of happiness or feel good hormones, and then at the same time stress hormones, and then you feel at the end of the day you don't feel so much of a stress. Females tend to have fluctuations in the serotonin levels, which is the regulator, due to hormonal cycles that impact their mood, and it makes it so noticeable in them. And for females, I would say that they are more and more at the mercy of their emotions. And so they tend to be very expressive of emotions than males. And we'll see why very soon. Now let's look at sadness. Sadness as an emotion. Sadness as an emotion is being regulated by the hormone cortisol and serotonin. I've already said that serotonin is more like a general hormone for regulation. It's a new neurotransmitter that does the regulation. Cortisol levels, we are talking about cortisol, is just about stress. So it's known as the stress hormone, and high levels of it is linked to feelings of sadness and depression. And when there's prolonged stress, people become depressed. So the key to all these things is that you find a balance. There will definitely be stress in life, but you find a balance. You find a pleasurable activity that you can do in those stressful moments, so that you have an equal balance between the stress levels and the feel good levels. And at the end of the day, the net effect is cancelled. I mean, there's a everything is brought to a zero effect. Okay. Males may exhibit this level of sadness through irritation when people irritate them, and extreme levels may lead to anger and things like that. So anger due to social expectations or suppressing vulnerability. They are expecting things to be done and then they are disappointed. They can be sad, they can be angry, they can be furious, all of that. And in females is overly expressive because of the serotonin. Females will tend to overly express it, but males may be quiet about it and feel it so deep within. The next emotion we'll talk about is anger. Anger. And finally, when we are closing, we would learn about how we can manage this as Christians. So anger is being regulated, or it's as a result of the hormones testosterone and then cortisol. So stress again, stress. Testosterone, higher levels of it is linked to aggression and then anger, particularly in response to perceived threats and challenges. So the challenges may not have come, but just the perception of it, the anxiety, the anxiety for the next amount of money to pay certain bills, the anxiety for the next amount of money to do maintenance of your vehicle, then that anxiety alone can shoot up testosterone levels and it brings stress. So males typically they have higher levels of testosterone and then it makes them very prone to anger and aggression. They easily show these signs unlike females. Then fear. Fear is not our future goddess. So fear is also as a result of cortisol, stress again, and then adrenaline. And adrenaline is a typical example is what I gave at the beginning. When you see something that brings about fear or anxiety, there's a sudden rush of adrenaline, and it will increase your heart rate, and there can be increased energy levels, and that is why somebody who may be in a wheelchair will see a disaster approaching and then can just jump out of the wheelchair and run all around. It's due to a sudden rush in adrenaline, which has increased the energy level so that something that the person will not be able to do under normal circumstances, the person would not think twice but do it this time around. Like you are being chased by a dog, you don't mind jumping a wall that is so high. At that moment, the sudden adrenaline rush brings about a certain level of energy that pushes you to do things that under normal circumstance you will not be able to do. So heightened alertness and then fear responses, all of these are as a result of adrenaline. The cortisol triggers that body stress response and it prepares it to reaction, react to that perceived danger or threat. Males will exhibit this fear through fight or flight responses. Somebody approaches them with anger, so that fight or flight response. And this is driven by adrenaline. On the other hand, for females, when they experience fear, their natural action is to seek for support or to seek for a rise in oxytocin. And we have talked about oxytocin as a love hormone, that feeling of love. So it could come about as a result of physical touch. It could come about as a result of hug and things of that sort. So when females are being faced with threats or perceived threats, their natural response is to look onto something to hold on to. If there's no one around to hold on to, you don't mind holding on to things. So a female is um, at the verge of an accident, the person will hold tightly to the steering wheel. There's that sense of holding on tight to something. And I remember very well a scenario that happened in my life, in a personal story of this. I was in a commercial vehicle one time, one of these church to campus, and the Trotsky field break, the bus field break. We're saved by God's grace anyway, and that's the testimony. But the lesson from here about the fear, there was a lady sitting next to me, a lady whom, under normal circumstance, I would say that will not even may not want to, have a body contact with you in a car or have that close contact with anybody sitting next to the person. I'm just speaking in general context of certain ladies. When there was that sudden brake failure, this this lady held me so tightly. He just grabbed my grabbed my um, arm so tightly in the car, as if I had not perceived the threat that we have faced or the impending danger, but there was that sense of, I believe, sense of seeking support for her, and then that was the action that person took. So that's with females, how they respond to fear. But the testimony is that we were saved that day by the ticket of bush, just around that area, around that great junction. By that ticket of bush there, just like in Abraham's case, the Lord showed him the ram in the ticket of bush. In our case, the Lord saved the car in that ticket of bush. Now, the next emotion we'll be looking at is love. Love. So, love is also being regulated by oxytocin, as I've mentioned earlier, dopamine, that's the feel good hormone, especially on the part of males, but also in females. Then serotonin, as I've mentioned, is just the regulator. So, the oxytocin, it brings about the bonding, the attachment, and then the physical touch, emotional connections. All of these are activities promotes or increase the level of oxytocin. Then dopamine is the feel good reward associated with love and attachment. Serotonin is just the regulator. So more oxytocin is released during bonding activities, any bonding activity at all, hugs, physical touches, all of that bring about high levels of oxytocin. And it promotes long-term attachment and nurturing behaviors. The nurturing behavior, typical example is that between the mother and the baby breastfeeding. So that's one of the roles of oxytocin. So how does these emotions we have talked about play out in females? And I'm careful to talk about this because um, we normally hear of issues of mood swings with females than with males. But of course, males also have mood swings, but very predominant in females. And I'll tell you why by uh, these few points ahead. It's because their cycle, their calendar, females are very special beings. They have their own calendar. They don't use the January, February, March calendar. They have their own 28-day calendar, which works on their own. So in this calendar period, there are seasons and times, four major seasons and times in this calendar period. And within these four major seasons or four major phases, there are hormones that are being released, or there is that regulation of hormones in this period, and these things lead to emotional impact or how their emotional responses may be. So with the days 1 to 5, that's the menstrual phase where they are releasing blood and other fluids. These are the stages where they have low levels of estrogen and progesterone. And the impact is that they have very low mood, they easily become tired or weak, and everything or many things irritates them because already they are in pain, they are losing out blood, and so they get weak, and many of them may find it difficult to even eat, and a lot of things goes on in their body. So the slightest actions could from anyone at all could bring about some level of irritation. So if you work in a space with female and you begin to notice some of these things, and very normally within the first 3 days or first 2 days, it's very noticeable in about 70% of females that you could literally see it sometimes, especially if you work closely with them. You would realize that their energy levels at work are very low. Almost every 1 or 2 minutes at work, they are putting their heads on the table. They they just don't feel like doing anything, but they just have to show up. So they are there. So those are those seasons, and how their emotions play out. Then the follicular phase, that's the 6th, 14, the following week after the flow is over, there are increased levels of estrogen. And these are the seasons where they have the high energy, the energy begins to build up. And then they are in a very positive mood, they're in a very good mood. And so within the 28 days, you realize that 2 of the weeks they have high energy for work, and they're very matured females put in their best within this period, so that at the other stages, when they are not so productive, at least their good work in their previous weeks takes care of the others. They have the ovulation stage between the 15th day and 20th day, where there is a peak level of estrogen and testosterone. They have high energy there, they have confidence there. I talk about some other things in my book, Chemicals at Play. You may want to read that. They are bright at those seasons. They look more beautiful at those seasons, those ovulation stage, because those are very attractive stage, because their ovaries are producing eggs, and there is that sense in their body to long for the opposite gender. And so the hormones regulate all these things. So there's a high energy, confidence, and you can put this into use at work. These are the periods you have to put in your bed at work, so that at the first and last stages, I mean, when you are not so productive, it's quite understandable. So the 21 to 28, that's the luteal phase. That's very high levels of progesterone and estrogen. However, when there is no incidence of pregnancy, because the ovulation stage is normally to attract a seed and then lead to pregnancy. But if there is no pregnancy at the luteal phase, these high levels of progesterone and estrogen suddenly drops, and they drop drastically. And that's what will lead to the mood swings and irritability. And the same thing continues. So just before the menstruation starts, you see the mood swings, then it goes into the actual period. So that's about how emotions play out in dear females. So how can we manage hormone levels, both as males and females? How can we manage? One is through physical activity, exercise. Because as we exercise, there's an increased level of endorphins and dopamine, fueling good hormones. And these will thereby reduce our cortisol levels and improve our mood. I've put in these references as well. The presentation material is available for download in the description. Then also our health, our healthy diet, having a very good balanced diet, foods that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids like fish, flax seeds, antioxidants, fruits, the greens, the berries, the dark chocolates, all sort of improve because of the antioxidants. And then amino acids in nuts and eggs, they help to manage the levels of hormones in our body. Regular exercise also does that, also by reducing the amount of fat deposits under the tissues in our body. Because when there are a lot of fat, in the case of females, there is a lot of estrogen that's being stored under those fat tissues, and that can lead to a lot of hormonal imbalance. So there is a need for regular exercise. Then stress management. This has to do normally with the cortisol levels. When you practice meditation, mindfulness, breath exercises, listening to music, simple exercise like breathing in, holding your breath for some few seconds, and breathing out would help reduce stress. So that can help reduce cortisol levels in our body. Then social connections. Social connections like time with the family, time with loved ones can boost your oxytocin levels and serotonin and thereby reduce the cortisol levels. So when you connect with your family, connect with your loved ones, can help manage that hormonal level. Then also hydration that can be under the healthy diet. Drinking a lot of water. In the case of females during those cycles, sometimes it's very difficult to eat and things like that. Taking in good amount of water can deal with pain, and it can also help the body absorb a lot of vitamins, which will in turn regulate the hormonal levels. So our hormones play out in so many ways, and they play out or have a direct impact on our emotions. It's purely an activity of our body, the natural makeup. So there's little we can do as natural men about the body. But that is where self control comes in for you as the believer or as a Christian watching this. We are the mercy of these chemicals. The first time I got to see hormones as chemicals in our body and how they regulate our emotions, it's sort of changed my perspectives about so many things. So, we are the mercy of these chemicals. That is the fact. That is the established fact. But your knowledge of this fact brings a level of deliverance. Then, beyond your knowledge, your ability to do or to your ability to control them is the ultimate thing that we are looking at today. So it's not just about the facts. It's not just about how your body responds to it. It's not just about having the knowledge of it, but your ability to control it in your space, in your workspace, in your love relationship. That is the important thing. So yes, we are at the mercy of our emotions, we are at the mercy of chemicals and things like that. But just think of it, the first deliverance you can have. Think of it. A whole big man, a big woman like you, would you sit down to be controlled by chemicals? Chemicals that can even be produced in the lab. And I tell you, these hormones you are talking about, it's not just that they are naturally in the body alone, they are actually being produced in the lab as well. And so in certain cases, people are being injected with certain hormones so that they can even reproduce. So hormones can be created in the lab, injected in the body. There are hormones that are created and injected to help people feel good, feel happy. And some of these things are what regulate sleep. So people get so stressed that they have to take in certain medication that can help them sleep. All of these have direct impact on your hormones. These birth control pills and things people take anyhow, they have direct impact on your hormones and they can lead to hormonal imbalances. And mind you, hormones, they are very complex. You may be dealing with one particular hormone and it may be affecting another thing in your body. And so it's very important that we understand that we are big men, we are big women, we are bigger than the chemicals that are inside our body, doing all these things, bringing about all these things. And so we need to have that mastery over the chemicals. So as a natural man, yes, you're a natural man, your body would have these things, rashes, this adrenaline rush and things like that. But as a Christian, what is your response to fear? What's your response to anger? That's where your self-control and the word of God that you have built up within you comes into play. So first you must acknowledge that you are bigger than your emotions. You are bigger than the chemicals that are working through you. That's the first deliverance. The first thing you need to know. This the first thing you need to know. Then we also need to understand that we don't just have to know the emotion. We have to master it. We need to master our emotions by consciously working in the spirit. Galatians 5:16-17 says that we should walk by the Spirit, that will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the desires of the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit against that of the flesh. They are opposed against each other to keep you from doing what things you want to do. So you have closed from church, you are walking home, a lonely road. You are in a state of fear. Already when you were going, Pastor had already prayed that you go home, you reach home safely and things like that. But still, you walk along that path and there's a perceived threat. So you are afraid, and there are rashes, hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline in your body that brings about the fear. So know that you can master that sense of fear, and also with the word of God, you can master these emotions. So these are certain scriptures that you can reflect on. Happiness, yes, it's good to be happy, but it's also bad to be overly happy. Sometimes people are so overexcited that um, they over express their excitement in distraction and things like that. Like SHS graduates complete school and then they want to destroy things in the school and all sort of things like that. So over excitement can also be bad. So Philippians 4:4 says that we should rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. So this should be your source of happiness. Rejoice in Him. Rejoice in Him. Then sadness. The Lord is near to them that are broken heart and a contrite heart. He saves the crushed spirit. Psalm 34:8-10. Also know that even when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, Psalm 23, you don't have to fear any evil. That is with fear, okay? Because the Lord is with you. So whatever sadness you're going through, the brokenheartedness, Psalm 34, the Lord is near to you. If you can see that He is near to you, then you can have a sense of assurance that you are walking with God. Anger. Be angry. Yes, the anger, it's an emotion that will come because certain things have knocked it into the stage. So it will play out. So you'll be angry from time to time. But do not sin. When you are angry, don't say hurtful words because you can't recall back your words like you can recall your messages on WhatsApp. Be angry, but do not sin. And do not let the sun go down on your anger. If you feel you are angry, you can be mute. You decide not to talk. But then you can also trigger in things that are pleasurable to bring about that level of dopamine that will bring about the feel good and happiness emotion. To be angry, but do not sin. And don't let the sun go down on your anger. The next is fear. Above all, sorry, I think I missed. Yeah. Fear and love. Fear, even though you walk through the valley of shadow of death, you will fear no evil, for God is with you. His rod and his staff comforts you. Psalm 23. Then finally, in love, 1 Peter 4:8. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sin. So, 1 Peter chapter 4:8, we understand that love covers a multitude of sin. Love covers sadness. Love covers anger. Love covers fear. Perfect love casts away all fear. So this is how you would manage your emotions as a believer. When the Lord is near unto you, you should be angry, yes, but do not sin. Jesus was angry at the people who were doing business in the temple. You would be angry by certain things that you see. It's an emotion. You can't do without anger. But then don't sin. when you are angry. Same with fear and then love. And these are certain references and for extended reading purposes. I believe that today's session has been very informative. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any stories to share about this, how it relates to a situation you've been through or you have experienced, you can share in the comment section also with us so that we know that truly these things we are talking about are not so abstract. God bless you, and I pray for you that the Lord will help you manage your emotions very well. Amen.